As always, please retry the question before watching the video. So with adding questions, if you don't know if it's yes or no, you can always just read what comes after the yes or no to determine which answers can be eliminated. So you don't even need to know yes or no to eliminate most of the wrong answers. However, if you can determine yes or no, and the more practice you get with these, the easier it will be to determine yes or no, then that will help eliminate, obviously, half the answers. So let's just go ahead and read our question, and we'll read it with the added portion in. Expressionism, as it was called, with its splashes of color, stark lines, and distorted objects, replaced representational or literal modes of painting. And so my guess is that yes, we are going to need this because it hasn't told us anything about expressionism or what it is to this point in the essay. So this just gives us a better idea of what expressionism is, and therefore we're probably going to need it. But we'll do it as if you didn't know if it was yes or no, and hopefully you'll see you can come up with an answer either way. A, because it describes features of expressionist art with which the reader might be unfamiliar. This is almost certainly the right answer. It's exactly what we just said. Because it explains why representational modes were no longer preferred. Because it explains why representational modes were no longer preferred. It does not explain that. It just tells us about what expressionism is, but not why the other modes were not preferred. Because it represents information found elsewhere in the essay. It does not talk about this yet in the essay. It hasn't told us what expressionism is yet. And if you're not reading closely enough as you're going, you might not know that. That's why one of the many, many reasons, we highly encourage you to be reading super closely and reading everything as you're working through the essays. Because it detracts from the paragraph's focus on who influenced Bach's specific style of dance. No, that's not true. It really doesn't take away. We need to know this information, and it hasn't told us this information yet. So this confirms that answer A is the right answer. If this made sense to you, please add it to your worksheet. Write what you learned along with your answer, and then continue on to do the remaining adding questions that you missed on this test. If this is the final adding question you missed on this test, please go ahead and do the adding mastery to get 10 questions correct in a row before moving on to the next category.